Have you ever been the one who holds everything together, but feels like no one sees you falling apart? Grace was always the strong one. After losing her mother young and caring for a father whose memory fades more each day, she became the quiet center of a crumbling world. Then one afternoon, she asked her boss for time off to visit her father in the hospital. His response, a condition she never expected, one that would change everything. If you had to choose between your dignity and the only family you have left, what would you do? What if someone finally saw through your silence, not to fix you, but to sit beside you in it? This is not just a love story. It is a story about quiet strength, about what we carry, and what happens when we finally set it down. Come listen. You might see yourself in her story. The office of Northwind Technologies always had a certain hum, a soft blend of keyboard taps, muted voices, and the faint hiss of the espresso machine down the hallway. It was background noise, subtle, constant, the kind that disappeared into itself. Grace Mitchell had worked inside that hum for almost 3 years. She was 28, the executive assistant to Nathan Calloway, CEO and founder. She was on time, precise, calm in every situation. Most people in the office said she had a stillness about her. Some thought she was cold, but those who worked near her understood. Grace was steady because she had to be. She had learned it the hard way. At 3:07 in the afternoon, her phone rang. The name on the screen read, Evelyn, Father's Care. Grace stepped out of the meeting room without a sound. She answered, yes, a pause. Then a voice. Grace, this is Evelyn. Your father had a fall. Her breath caught. Is he is conscious, but disoriented. We are transferring him to Massachusetts General for evaluation. Grace placed 2 fingers against the bridge of her nose. Did he hurt himself? His right side gave out. We do not think there are fractures. But he is confused. He asked for your mother. Grace closed her eyes. Her mother had passed away 20 years ago. I will come. I need to speak to someone first. Back at her desk, her hands shook. She folded them in her lap, waited. The shaking did not stop. Her father had Parkinson's disease. He had been diagnosed 6 years ago. It started small. A few stiff movements, light tremors. Now, there were days when he forgot what month it was. Some days, he forgot who she was. Grace stayed calm. She opened her calendar, checked the schedule. In less than 90 minutes, Nathan Calloway would host a private investor meeting. She had prepared everything, the presentations, the vendor lists, the catering, but she could not stay. She stood, walked down the long corridor toward his office. Her heels clicked against the marble tile, louder than usual. As she approached the door of Nathan, she stopped. People always paused at that door. It was made of dark oak, heavier than the others. No nameplate, just the initials NC engraved beside the handle. She knocked twice, firm, controlled. Come in. His voice came through the door, steady, measured. She turned the handle, entered. Nathan Calloway sat behind a walnut desk. A tablet rested in his hand. Light from the large windows fell across his shoulders and highlighted the silver near his temples. He did not look up. Grace stepped forward, closed the door behind her. I need to ask something, she said. He set the tablet down, met her eyes. His expression was unreadable. I will not take long, Grace added, but this is personal. Nathan leaned back in his chair, folded his hands. Go ahead. Grace inhaled slowly. Her throat was dry. My father had a medical emergency. He is being taken to Mass General. I would like to leave for the day. She waited. No response, no frown, no approval. Just stillness. His fingers moved slightly, tapping his thumb to his index finger. She had seen him do that before. When he was thinking, "I understand the timing is difficult," she continued, "but I can check in remotely later. Everything is in your folder. Vendor checklists are complete." Silence. Then he spoke. "You rarely ask for anything." "That is true," Grace replied. Nathan studied her. Why now? Grace hesitated. Because if something happens to him, and I was sitting here going over performance slides, I will not be able to live with that. Nathan leaned forward slightly. How long has he been sick? 6 years. Parkinson's. He lives in assisted care now. Nathan's voice changed just a little. Softer. You do not live with him. I did. For a while. Until it became too much for one person. My mother passed when I was 8. It has been just the two of us since. Another silence. Nathan stood, walked slowly around the desk. He did not get too close. His movements were quiet, his posture controlled. You are shaking. Grace blinked. I know. He watched her, eyes steady. Then he said, You may leave, on one condition. Her heart jumped. What condition? He looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Not stern, not cold, just human. Have dinner with me. Grace narrowed her eyes. I do not understand. Dinner? Tonight? No business talk, no expectations. At my place, that is all. The silence in the room deepened. Grace examined his face. She expected to find smugness, a trap. But there was nothing like that. There was only sincerity and a kind of loneliness that caught her off guard. Why, she asked. Nathan looked away, then back again. Because I know what it feels like to lose someone slowly. I also know what it is like to come home to an empty house. She did not reply. He took one step back. You can say no. You can still go. But it would mean something to me if you came. Grace felt the pulse in her ears. She thought of her father, asking for her mother. She thought of driving to the hospital, alone. She thought of the man standing in front of her, a man who had never asked anyone for anything outside of work. I will come, she said softly. Nathan nodded once. I will text you the address. She turned toward the door, one hand on the handle, behind her. Nathan said, I hope your father is all right. She paused, then walked out. The door closed behind her, and the office hum returned. Grace sat in her car for 5 full minutes before turning the key. The engine hummed quietly. She gripped the steering wheel with both hands. Her phone buzzed, a message from Nathan. The address, no emojis, no follow-up text, just a location in Beacon Hill. It was not far, 12 minutes without traffic, 25 if the lights were against her. She did not drive, not yet. Instead, she looked at her own reflection in the rearview mirror. Her expression was unreadable, the same calm mask she wore at work, but inside, she felt 1,000 small thoughts pulling in opposite directions. Dinner. Just dinner. But not just anyone. It was Nathan Calloway, the man who never said anything unnecessary, the man who had never once asked her how her day was, and now this. She could have said no. He made that clear. But she had not. Grace leaned her head back against the seat. Why did I say yes? That question stayed with her the entire drive. The house was simple, a brownstone, 3 floors, tucked behind tall trees and black iron fencing. She parked across the street, walked up the stone path. The porch light was on, before she could knock. The door opened. Nathan stood there in a dark sweater and jeans, no tie, no watch. He looked normal, unrecognizable from the suited man behind the walnut desk. Come in, he said. His voice was quiet. Grace stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of roasted vegetables and something herbal. Rosemary. Maybe. She noticed the absence of noise. No television, no music, just the sound of the wind against the windows. Nathan motioned to a coat rack. "You can leave your things there." She nodded, unbuttoned her coat, and hung it beside his. He led her toward the kitchen. The space was open, clean, wooden cabinets, black countertops. A single candle burned near the stove. Nathan picked up a spoon and stirred something in a pot. Steam rose gently into the air. "I made soup," he said. Grace raised an eyebrow. "You cook? I try. This is lentil, with lemon and garlic. My mother used to make it." She paused. "I did not know you had a mother." That sentence felt strange the moment it left her lips. Nathan did not take offense. He gave a small smile, one she had never seen before. She passed away 8 years ago. Alzheimer's. She was 61. Grace said nothing, but she took a step closer. Nathan continued stirring. She used to be a nurse, loved her job, always believed in listening before diagnosing. Grace folded her arms across her chest. "Is that why you invited me to tell me about your mother?" "No," he said. "I invited you because I saw something in your face today that I recognized." "What was that?" Nathan looked up. Someone holding everything together with both hands, afraid to let go for even a second. Grace looked away. "That sounds dramatic." "Maybe," he said, "but I have been there." He turned off the stove, ladled soup into 2 white bowls. They sat at a small table near the window. No centerpiece, no polished silverware, just 2 bowls, 2 spoons, and the soft light from the candle. Grace tasted the soup. It was warm, earthy, comforting in a way she did not expect. "You did not have to do all this," she said. "I know." Then why Nathan rested his spoon on the napkin beside his bowl? "Because I wanted to give you one night where you are not the caretaker, not the assistant, not the one who keeps it all running." Grace stared at him. "I do not know what to say to that." "You do not have to say anything." They ate in silence for a while. Outside, the wind picked up. A few dry leaves brushed the window. Grace set her spoon down. "You know, I thought you were asking for something else." Nathan looked at her directly. "I know. That is why I was careful. I did not want you to feel pressured." She hesitated, but it still felt strange. "I understand." Another silence. Then Grace said softly, "My father used to ask me to read the newspaper out loud every morning. He said my voice calmed him." Nathan listened. "But 2 weeks ago," she continued, "he looked at me and asked who I was. Then he apologized for not shaving before meeting a guest. He thought I was a nurse." Nathan did not respond with words. He just let the moment breathe. Grace exhaled. "I keep showing up, because that is what love is. Right? You stay, even when it hurts." Nathan nodded once. "You stay, even when it no longer feels like they know you stayed." They sat quietly after that. Minutes passed. Nathan cleared the dishes. Grace offered to help. He declined. She wandered to a bookshelf in the corner. Old paperbacks, a few framed photographs. One showed a younger Nathan, seated on a bench beside a smiling woman. Her eyes were kind. Her hands rested on his. "That is her?" Grace asked. "Yes. She looks like she knew everything." She did. Grace turned toward him. "So, what happens now?" Nathan dried his hands with a towel, met her gaze. "Now, you drive to the hospital. You sit with your father, and you do not feel guilty for leaving this dinner early." Her eyebrows rose. "You knew I would not stay long, I guessed." She walked to the door. reached for her coat. Before leaving, she paused. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not being who I thought you were." Nathan gave a small nod. "Drive safe, Grace." She stepped out into the night. The wind was cooler now. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, got into the car, and drove. Grace arrived at the hospital just before 8:00 p.m. Her father was asleep. Monitors blinked softly beside his bed. A nurse assured her he had eaten, taken his medication, and showed no signs of further confusion. "They are keeping him overnight," she said. "For observation, nothing alarming." Grace sat by the window for a while. She watched the lights from passing ambulances below. The room was quiet, her father's breathing slow and even. She did not wake him. There was a small folded blanket at the foot of the chair. She took it and placed it over his legs. Then she stepped out. Back in her car, she sat in silence. She had done what she could. Now, her hands returned to the wheel, and her thoughts returned to Nathan. She had not promised to come back, but her mind kept circling the unfinished feeling of that meal, the things said, and the things that were not. It was 8:41 when she parked outside his house again. This time, she knocked. Nathan opened the door without a word. He looked surprised, but not shocked. He stepped aside, and she walked in. The warmth of the home greeted her again, the same scent of rosemary, the faint sound of a kettle whistling in the distance. Nathan closed the door. "She is stable," Grace said. "My father, just resting." He nodded once. "That is good." She unbuttoned her coat, hung it in the same spot. This time, she noticed the other coats. 3 total, 1 for rain, 1 heavier, a navy wool blend, each placed neatly, with space between them. Nathan motioned toward the living room. "Would you like tea?" She followed him. The room was modest. No giant television. No crowded shelves, just 1 sofa, 2 armchairs, a small lamp, a low bookshelf against the wall. Everything was intentional. There was no clutter, no personal chaos. Grace sat on the edge of the sofa. Nathan returned a moment later with 2 mugs. He handed one to her, chamomile, still steaming. They sat in silence for a minute, then another. Grace glanced around. On a shelf near the window, there was a small photo in a brass frame. The same woman from the kitchen photo, his mother. There was another frame beside it, a certificate, old, yellowed slightly. Grace leaned forward to read it. It was a state license, nursing, Massachusetts. Dated 1981, name Helen Calloway. Nathan noticed her looking. She was proud of that, he said. Even when the disease started taking pieces away, she still remembered being a nurse. Grace set her mug down gently. "How long did you care for her?" she asked. Nathan looked at the cup in his hands. 3 years at home, then 6 months in memory care. He exhaled slowly. "Those 3 years were the hardest thing I have ever done." Grace said nothing. "I lost her in pieces." He continued. "First, she forgot my name. Then, the street we lived on. Then, how to use a fork." His voice stayed calm, but his eyes told a different story. "She used to hum while folding laundry. Same tune every time. I never knew what it was. After she passed, I heard it once at a grocery store. It was an old hymn." He paused. "I stood in that aisle for 10 minutes, just listening." Grace folded her hands in her lap. "I know what that kind of quiet feels like," she said. He looked at her. Grace continued. "When my father sleeps. It is the only time I let myself feel tired." Nathan nodded. "And when he forgets your name," she hesitated. "I remind him. And then I go into the bathroom and let the faucet run for a while. Nathan leaned back in his chair. You do not talk about this at work. Would you, Grace asked, a faint smile. No, he said. I would not. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was shared, understood, respected. Grace glanced down at the tea in her hands. The warmth had seeped into her fingers. She realized she had not felt warmth like that all day. Nathan stood. There is something I want to show you, he said. She followed him into a narrow hallway. At the end was a small door. He opened it. Inside was a room with books, stacks of paper, a desk, a closed laptop, and a bed, twin-sized, plain sheets. Beside it, a wheelchair. This was hers, Nathan said, after she could not sleep upstairs. Grace stepped inside. There was no sadness in the room, just stillness, like something had been carefully left behind. She wanted to stay home as long as possible, he said. So I made this space for her. Grace touched the back of the chair gently. It feels like she is still here. She is, he said quietly. In some ways. They walked back to the living room. Grace picked up her coat. I should go. It is late. Nathan did not try to stop her. Thank you, he said. For what? For coming back? Most people do not. She gave a small nod. Outside, the sky had turned to slate. The wind had softened. A few leaves moved along the pavement, but the world felt hushed. Grace opened the door, then paused. She looked at him. Good night, Nathan. He met her eyes. Good night, Grace. And then the door closed. Behind her, the house remained still. Nathan reheated the soup in silence. Grace sat at the small kitchen table. Her hands rested in front of her. The soft ticking of a wall clock filled the space between them. It was almost 9. The world outside had turned to night. Streetlights cast warm reflections on the floor. The air smelled of garlic and lemon. It felt like something from a memory. Nathan placed a warm bowl in front of her. I thought you might be hungry. Grace looked at it for a second, then nodded. Thank you. He sat across from her. Neither of them picked up a spoon right away. Grace looked down at her hands. I used to cook for him, she said. Her voice was soft. Before he moved to care, Nathan tilted his head. What did you make simple meals? Stews, scrambled eggs, toast with jam and butter. Not too sweet. He preferred the dark kind, blackberry or fig. A faint smile appeared. He was very particular. Nathan stirred his soup slowly. My mother was the same. She could not stand food that was too hot. It had to cool for exactly 4 minutes. She used to set a timer. Grace picked up her spoon. She sounds like someone who needed structure. She did, Nathan said. It gave her peace, even when the illness took most of that away. They began eating. The soup was mild, earthy, not fancy, but real, like something someone made by hand. Grace spoke again. My father had this old leather chair, brown and worn. It creaked every time he sat. He swore it helped his back. Nathan smiled. Did it really help? No. He just refused to replace it. She paused. I kept it. Even now. It is still in my apartment. I sit in it when I feel scattered. Nathan rested his spoon. I kept a sweater. Grace looked up. Nathan nodded. It was hers. Light blue, worn at the sleeves. It smelled like her for a long time. I never washed it. Still haven't. They were quiet again. Grace stared into her bowl. There is something about the objects. They hold more than memories. They hold rhythm, familiarity. Is that not true? Nathan nodded. They carry a kind of peace, even if it fades. She set her spoon down. I do not talk like this. Not with many people. Neither do I, Nathan said. She gave a soft laugh. Really, I thought you were the social type. He smirked. I have never been to a party. Grace raised an eyebrow. Not even one. Not in the last 10 years. She leaned back. What have you been doing all this time I worked? Built the company, spent 2 years caring for my mother, then started working again. Grace was quiet. Nathan looked at her. And you. She took a breath. Graduated. Found a job. My father needed coverage. I moved back home, balanced the bills, drove him to therapy, went to work, came home, did it again. Nathan traced the rim of his mug. People think strength is loud, big gestures, clear voices. He met her eyes. I think strength is quiet, showing up again, without anyone watching. Grace held his gaze. I never thought of it that way. Nathan looked down. Maybe we do not need to be understood by everyone, just one person. The clock ticked. Grace noticed how his hands sat still, not clenched, not tense, just still. I used to believe I had to be useful to deserve love, she said, helpful, reliable, calm. If I could be that, maybe I mattered. Nathan waited. She went on. Now, I wonder, if I stopped being strong, would anyone still stay? Nathan picked up his mug, took a sip, then set it down gently. I would. Grace blinked. She did not speak. Then asked softly, why? Because I know what it feels like to hold your breath all day, and I see how hard you try, even when no one says anything. His voice was steady, simple. Grace leaned forward. Do you get tired? Nathan nodded. All the time. What do you do with it? I sit in silence until I can move again. They both smiled. Grace looked down at the table. There are days, she said, when I forget what being young is supposed to feel like. Nathan replied, maybe we grew up too early. She stood, carried her bowl to the sink. Nathan followed with his. They stood beside each other. Quiet again. Grace turned to him. Thank you. For the soup. And for this. You are welcome, he said. She walked toward the door. Nathan stayed behind. At the doorway, she paused. I do not know what this is. You do not have to know. It does not need a name. Grace nodded. She stepped outside. The street was still. A few stars hung above the city. She opened her car door, sat down, whispered to herself, maybe this is how something begins. And she drove into the quiet night. The room felt colder than she remembered. Grace stood near the window of the hospital room where her father now rested. She held her arms loosely across her chest. Soft morning light filtered through the blinds. It created narrow shadows across the floor. The man in the bed was awake, but he did not look at her. His eyes stared toward the ceiling. His mouth moved slightly. No words formed. Grace had brought a blanket with her. It was the one he used to like, the blue fleece with the soft edge. Now it sat across his lap. His hands did not touch it. She took a quiet breath. Good morning, Dad. No reply. She stepped closer, sat beside the bed. The chair made a soft sound under her weight. I brought the blanket, the one you always asked for in winter. Still nothing. She leaned forward. Dad. It is Grace. He blinked, slowly, then turned his head toward her, but his eyes did not change. He looked at her the way strangers sometimes do, curious, kind, confused. Then he spoke. You are new. Grace froze. Her hands tightened on the arms of the chair. She did not speak. He pointed weakly toward the cabinet near the window. There is juice inside. Please bring me a glass. My daughter always brings it. His voice was soft, wandering. Grace nodded once. She walked to the cabinet, opened the door. It was empty, no juice. She closed the cabinet again. When she turned back, he had already closed his eyes. Grace sat down again. She did not cry. Not yet. Instead, she watched the steady rhythm of his chest rising and falling. She remembered him driving her to school, his hand tapping on the steering wheel. He used to hum the same tune, something quiet with no words. Now he did not know her name. Grace rested her elbows on her knees, pressed her fingers together. Her knuckles turned white. This moment was not sudden. She had known it would come. But no one ever tells you how still the forgetting feels, how deep it settles in your bones. She looked around the room, a tray of untouched breakfast, a scratchy hospital blanket, folded on a chair. The faint, familiar smell of disinfectant. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She ignored it. She stayed seated, and she waited. A nurse entered quietly. Young. Soft voice. He is stable. You can stay as long as you like. Grace nodded. Thank you. The nurse hesitated. Sometimes they return, just for a moment, especially when it is quiet. Grace listened, then nodded again. The nurse left. Grace reached into her bag, pulled out an old paperback. The spine was cracked, the cover soft and faded. Her father used to read it aloud when she was little. He would sit at the foot of her bed, his voice calm and even. She opened the book and began to read. Her voice was low, careful. She read 3 pages, then her throat caught. She stopped, closed the book, placed it beside her. Then she reached for his hand. It felt thinner than she remembered, cool, veins visible under pale skin. She held it gently. I am still here, she whispered. There was no reply. That silence hurt more than any word ever could. It was almost noon when she stood up. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead, then pulled the blanket up to his chest. She turned and walked out of the room. In the hallway, she stopped and stayed still. People passed her on both sides, a man pushing flowers on a metal cart, a doctor with tired eyes, 2 nurses laughing over a clipboard, but Grace did not move. She looked out the hallway window at the clouds beyond. Inside her chest, something shifted. Not pain, not panic, just a quiet unraveling. She walked slowly down the hall, turned into the visitors' lounge. There was a coffee machine in the corner, cold now, a table with magazines that no one ever read. She sat in the corner chair, folded her hands in her lap. The world outside the window kept moving, but inside, everything felt far away. She asked herself something simple. Who was she now, if her father no longer remembered her? Then who was she? Was she still the daughter? Was she still needed? She did not need answers. Not right now. She needed stillness. She stayed there for a long time. Then she reached for her phone. A message waited from Evelyn. He had a peaceful morning. I think your voice helped. Grace began to type. Thank you. I will head home soon, but she stopped. She stared at the words. She read them again. I will head home soon. She deleted the message, then typed again. I will come back tomorrow. Please tell him his tea is waiting. She sent it, then closed her eyes, took a deep breath, held it, released it, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel uncertain, not broken, not lost, just human. She pictured fog on a long road, soft, blurry, quiet, no need to rush, no need to know where it ended. She only needed to keep walking. The sky looked like rain. Grace sat in the hospital cafe with a paper cup of tea held between her palms. The window beside her stretched across the wall. Outside, the city wore a heavy gray coat. Clouds hung low, swollen, ready, but no rain fell. Evelyn walked in quietly. She carried a clipboard and a folded coat. Grace looked up. "Morning?" she said. "Barely," Evelyn replied with a gentle smile. "You did not go to work today." Grace shook her head. "I could not pretend today." Evelyn sat down across from her. She moved slowly, the way people do after long hours on their feet. "I checked on your father this morning," she said. Grace stayed quiet. "He asked for toast, not tea." Grace looked at her cup. "That used to be a Sunday thing. Toast and the newspaper." "Well," Evelyn said, "today is Monday." Neither of them laughed. Grace pressed her palms tighter against the cup. "He did not know me yesterday." "At all." Evelyn nodded. "I know." Grace whispered. "Does it ever stop hurting?" Evelyn tilted her head. "No, but it changes shape." They sat in silence for a while. The cafe hummed around them, voices, distant beeping, the buzz of machines. Then Evelyn said something that made Grace lift her eyes. "He came." Grace blinked. "Who your boss?" "The man from last week. Tall, sharp jaw, polite, expensive shoes." Grace looked confused. Nathan. Evelyn nodded. "He stood outside the room of your father, watched through the window, stayed for almost 10 minutes, then left." Grace said nothing. "He dropped off a bag at the front desk. Sandwiches, a small container of soup. There was a note too. I think—" Grace leaned forward slightly. "Did you see what it said?" Evelyn shook her head. "No. But I saw his face, and I know what it looks like when someone wants to help but does not know how." Grace looked out the window. The sky was still holding back. Evelyn stood up. "I will be nearby if you need anything." Grace nodded slowly. "Thank you." Evelyn walked away. Her footsteps faded into the hallway. Grace stayed where she was. The tea had gone cold. She pulled out her phone, opened her messages. The name of Nathan sat near the top. No new texts, no calls. She stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered, then fell still. She placed the phone on the table. Face down, she pictured 10 quiet minutes. Someone outside the window, just standing, not knocking, not asking, just present. She closed her eyes for a moment, then stood up. Outside, the wind had picked up. Grace walked slowly along the sidewalk beside the hospital. The trees lining the street had begun to change. Leaves curled, some golden, others brown. The breeze carried the scent of rain. Still, the sky held steady. She reached the parking lot, unlocked her car, opened the door, then paused. She sat in the seat of the driver without starting the engine. Her hands rested on her knees. Beside her, in the front seat, sat a soft cotton bag. Inside, a sweater for her father, a pack of crackers, a paperback novel she had not finished. She picked up the book, opened to the marked page. She did not read. She simply held it, letting the weight of it rest in her palms, like memory, like habit. Then she placed it down again, turned the key in the ignition, drove forward into the slow-moving traffic. That night, Grace returned home. The apartment was quiet. Outside her front door, someone had left a brown paper bag. She picked it up and carried it inside. No name, no note on the outside. She unfolded the top. Inside, a sandwich, a small container of soup, a sealed envelope. She opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a card. On it, a short sentence written in black ink. "You are not alone, even when it feels that way." There was no name, but she knew the handwriting. Grace sat at her kitchen table, unwrapped the sandwich, poured the soup into a bowl. She did not cry. She did not smile. She just ate, slowly, grateful for something warm, for something that did not ask questions. The streetlight outside flickered. Wind brushed the window pane. Somewhere in the distance, a siren passed. Grace looked at the chair across from her. It was empty, but it no longer felt hollow. Not tonight. Tonight, it felt like space. Space where something gentle might someday arrive. Grace found the envelope the next morning. It was tucked inside her mailbox, no return address, just her name, written in simple, steady handwriting. Black ink, centered, careful. She held it for a moment before opening it. Her thumb hesitated at the edge of the flap. Then she peeled it open. Inside was one folded sheet of paper. She unfolded it slowly. The words began without greeting. I was not sure whether to send this. But silence has weight too. And some things feel heavier when left unsaid. You once asked me why I invited you to dinner. I gave you a safe answer, but not the full one. The truth is, I saw something in your eyes the first week you came to work. Not sadness, not fear. Stillness, the kind people carry when they are holding too much and do not want anyone to notice. I recognized it because I used to wear the same expression. After my mother got sick. After I stopped seeing friends. After I began to mistake numbness for control. People think loneliness is loud, but it is not. It is quiet. It is when you walk into your own home and hear nothing move, not even your thoughts. You reminded me what it feels like to care without asking anything back. And I saw how exhausted you were, trying to pretend otherwise. That night I asked you to dinner. I was not trying to cross a line. I was trying to offer a pause, a breath, a moment where you could just be someone, not someone's support system, not someone's solution, just Grace. When I stood outside the hospital room of your father, I did not go inside, not because I did not want to, but because I understood there are moments that belong to no one else. I only wanted to be nearby, even if unseen. I do not have answers. I cannot fix what hurts. But I can tell you this. What you carry is not invisible. It is not small. It is not forgotten. You have been seen. Nathan Grace read the letter once. Then again. Her eyes followed every word as if they were being spoken aloud, softly, carefully. She folded the page and set it down on her kitchen table. Her fingers rested on the edge of the paper. The clock above the stove ticked slowly. Outside, the city began to move again. But inside her apartment, it was still. She picked up the letter again and opened it a third time. This time, her eyes stopped on a different sentence. You reminded me what it feels like to care without asking anything back. Grace let out a quiet breath. There was something in that line that pressed against the part of her that rarely spoke. The part that spent years holding up others. The part that learned how to stay quiet, even when she was tired. The part that never asked to be held in return. She stood and walked to the window. The sky was pale blue. A thin line of sunlight stretched across the rooftops. Grace leaned her forehead against the glass. In her mind, she saw Nathan, not in a suit, not in a meeting, but standing alone in a hallway, holding a paper bag, looking through a pane of glass at someone he could not reach, but did not walk away from. She turned from the window and sat back at the table. She opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet where she kept old notebooks and bills. She pulled out a blank card, plain white. Then she picked up a pen. Let it rest in her hand. She did not write right away. Instead, she let herself remember. the sound of her father's voice when he told bedtime stories, the creak of the old leather chair in the living room, the smell of laundry dried in the winter air, and more recently, the silence when he did not remember her name, the softness of his hand in hers, the way he looked out the window and called her a stranger. Then she thought of Nathan, of soup, and quiet rooms, and things that were offered without demand. She lowered her pen and wrote slowly, not a long reply, just 2 lines. Thank you for seeing me. I saw you too. She placed the card in an envelope. She did not write his name on it, not yet. She left it on the table beside the letter. Then she made tea. Not because she needed it, but because it felt like something steady, something warm to hold. She stood by the window as the water boiled. Steam rose from the kettle. She wrapped both hands around the mug, and in that moment, she did not feel heavy, not broken, not brave, just real. And for now, that was enough. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Grace stepped into the office lobby. Everything looked the same. The dark tile, the framed awards, the quiet hum of printers in the distance. But something inside her felt different. She walked to her desk, set her bag down, checked her emails, replied to the urgent ones. Her hands moved out of habit, not intention. Just after 10, a message popped up on her screen. From Nathan. Meeting. 10:15. Conference room 3. No subject, no explanation. She stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then she stood and walked down the hall. The room was empty when she arrived, except for him. Nathan sat at the end of the table, a folder in front of him, a cup of coffee beside it. He did not stand when she entered. He only looked up, closed the door. Please. Grace did, then sat. Nathan slid the folder toward her. She opened it. Inside was a printed offer, official, stamped, clear, position, regional strategy. Director location, Portland. Start date, flexible within 6 weeks. Compensation, increased housing assistance. Included. Grace closed the folder. She did not speak right away. Nathan leaned forward. There is no expectation, he said. This is not a condition. It is a door. You choose whether to walk through it. Grace looked at him. I never asked for this. I know. She folded her hands in her lap. Why now? Because I have seen what you can do. Because I know you are capable of more than people ask of you. And because staying small out of loyalty is not the same as being true to yourself. Grace looked down. She felt her heart beat louder than the clock on the wall. Nathan continued, If you want this, it is yours. If you do not, nothing changes. You stay here. Same job, same respect. He paused. I will not bring it up again. Grace nodded, then stood. Thank you. She walked out without another word. That afternoon, she sat in the hospital courtyard. Leaves fell in slow motion around her. Evelyn joined her. She held 2 coffees, offered one. Grace accepted it with a quiet nod. They sat without speaking for a while. Then Evelyn broke the silence. You look like someone who is carrying a heavy decision. Grace gave a tired smile. That obvious. I was a nurse for 20 years, Evelyn said. I know the face people make when their heart is louder than their head. Grace stared at the fountain in the center of the courtyard. It is a good offer. A big one. Evelyn nodded. And Grace exhaled. If I leave, who will sit with him when he forgets what day it is? If you stay, who will sit with you when you forget who you are? Grace turned to look at her. Evelyn did not flinch. I stayed too long once, she said. For my brother, then for my mother, then for a marriage that emptied me. I do not regret loving them. but I do regret forgetting myself." Grace lowered her eyes. "I have spent so many years being the strong one." Evelyn sipped her coffee. "I know." "And who gets to be strong for you?" Grace whispered. "No one ever has." Evelyn reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a small slip of folded paper. She handed it to Grace. On it was a single line: "You are allowed to matter too." Grace closed her hand around it. That evening, she sat by the window in her apartment. The letter from Nathan still sat on the table. Beside it, the envelope she had written but never mailed. She unfolded it. Read her words again. "Thank you for seeing me. I saw you too." She pressed her fingers to the paper, then set it back down. She walked to the window, opened it slightly. Cool air drifted in. The smell of pavement, faint sirens, the rustle of leaves. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor laughed. A child shouted. Someone played soft piano through a half-open door. Life, just happening. Grace stood there, not moving, not deciding, just feeling. She did not know where this path would go, but for the first time, the question was no longer, "Who needs me?" It was, "What do I need?" She leaned on the windowsill, closed her eyes. She was not ready to answer, but she was ready to ask. And that was a beginning. The sky was overcast when Grace arrived at the hospital. She brought no flowers, no food, only a small cloth bundle in her bag. The air inside the building felt still, even with the quiet bustle of staff and visitors. She walked slowly down the familiar hallway. Each step sounded softer than the last. At the door to the room of her father, she paused. Her hand hovered near the handle, not because she was afraid, but because she knew something had shifted inside her since the last time she stood there. She opened the door. He was awake, sitting upright. His eyes gazed toward the window. Grace stepped inside. He did not turn, did not blink. She walked to the chair beside the bed and sat down. "Hi, Dad." No reply, but she did not expect one. She reached into her bag and pulled out the small bundle. Inside was a paperback book, the one she used to carry on long visits. Its cover was worn, the corner still folded. She placed it gently on the nightstand beside his water cup. Then she leaned forward slightly. "Do you remember this?" Still no answer. She smiled to herself. "I used to hate this book," she said. "Too slow. Too many pages about nothing." She looked at him. "But you loved it. Said it taught you patience." He shifted slightly. Not toward her. Not away. Just movement. Grace took a deep breath. "I read it again," she said. "The whole thing." She rested her hands on her lap. "You were right. It is not about what happens. It is about what stays." There was a long pause. She listened to the steady hum of the monitor, the occasional rustle of leaves outside the window. Then, his voice came, faint, slow. "You are the nurse." Grace looked at him. His eyes met hers, but there was no recognition in them. She nodded once. "Yes. I am here to sit with you." He smiled, soft, gentle. "That is kind." She swallowed hard. "My pleasure." He closed his eyes again. The smile stayed on his face. Grace sat beside him, not speaking, not moving. She simply watched the rhythm of his breathing. In, out, in again. After a while, she stood, pulled the blanket over his shoulders. Then she reached into her bag one last time. She took out a photo, black and white, slightly curled at the edges. It showed a little girl on a bicycle, a man holding the seat, both laughing, both unaware the photo had been taken. She placed it on the table beside the book, then took a pen from her coat pocket. On the back of the photo, she wrote one line: "You always stayed until I learned to balance." She left the pen beside it. She looked at her father again. His eyes were closed, his breathing slow. She leaned forward, kissed his forehead. Then she whispered, "You can rest now." She stood, walked to the door, paused. She looked back once. The silence in the room no longer felt cold. It felt complete. She stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her. Outside, the wind had softened. Leaves moved gently along the edge of the sidewalk, not hurried, just passing through. Grace walked to her car, sat in the seat. She did not start the engine right away. Instead, she looked ahead, at the windshield, at her reflection in the glass, not searching for answers, only breathing. She placed both hands on the steering wheel, let the silence wrap around her. A new kind of silence, not the kind that held grief, but the kind that made space for something else, for whatever might come next. The apartment looked different with boxes everywhere. Grace stood in the center of the room. She held a roll of tape in one hand. The sound of it, pulling from the roll, echoed softly against the bare walls. Photos had been taken down, books stacked, drawers emptied. Only one thing remained untouched on the table: a white envelope, her name written on the front. Inside it, the offer from Nathan. She had signed it 2 days earlier, folded it neatly, but had not yet delivered it. Not because of doubt, but because she wanted to say goodbye to this version of herself. Properly, gently, she sat on the edge of the couch. Outside, a car honked somewhere far below. Children shouted, a dog barked. Life continued. Grace picked up the photo of her father she had left beside the book. She placed it in a small wooden frame, then carefully wrapped the book in cloth. The old one he had read to her. She would bring it with her, not because she needed it, but because it had been part of the road that led here. Her phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. "Your father smiled at toast this morning. Just thought you should know." Grace smiled, then typed back, "Thank you. That means more than you know." She set the phone down, then turned to the envelope. She picked it up, held it for a moment, then slid it into her bag. 3 hours later, she stood at the edge of the city. Her car was packed. The sky was clear, not bright, but open. She placed her hand on the roof of the car, breathed in, out, then opened the door before she started the engine. There was a knock on the passenger window. She turned. Nathan stood there. No suit, just a gray sweater, simple jeans. A quiet smile. Grace unlocked the door. He climbed in. "Did you forget something?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not this time." He nodded, then looked ahead. The road curved west, toward trees, then mountains, then Oregon. Grace placed both hands on the steering wheel. "You came to say goodbye?" Nathan looked at her. "No. I came to ask one question." She waited. He spoke softly. "Do you want to drive alone?" Grace looked ahead, then at him. "No," she said, "but I need to be the one who drives." He smiled. "Then I will be quiet. And bring snacks." She laughed. The kind of laugh that starts small but carries warmth. They sat like that for a moment. No rush, no pressure. Then Grace started the car. They passed through the city slowly, streetlights blinking, shadows shifting between buildings. Nathan reached into a bag and handed her a small sandwich wrapped in foil. She took it without a word. They ate in silence, but it was not an empty silence. It was shared, willing, trusted. By the time they reached the state border, the sky had turned golden. The mountains in the distance wore a layer of light. The road stretched wide and steady. Grace lowered the window slightly. The wind moved through her hair, cool, soft. Nathan reached forward and turned on the radio. A quiet song played, one without words. They listened and kept driving. That evening, they arrived in Portland. The apartment was still mostly empty, boxes stacked near the wall, curtains not yet hung. Grace unlocked the door. The smell of fresh paint still lingered. Nathan stepped inside behind her. He looked around, then nodded. "It feels like space," he said. She set her keys down. "It does." He turned to her. "What do you want to do first?" She looked at him, then at the empty kitchen, at the bare walls, at the window that showed a new skyline. She answered without thinking. "Make tea?" Nathan smiled. "I will unpack the cups." Later that night, they sat on the floor, two mugs beside them, a single lamp glowing in the corner, the city humming outside like a soft lullaby. Grace leaned back against the wall. Nathan sat beside her. Neither spoke. They did not need to. Her life was not fixed, not suddenly solved, but something had shifted, not because of a man, not because of a job, but because she had chosen to stay. For herself. She looked at Nathan. He looked at her, and the space between them felt wide, open, peaceful. Grace reached for her tea, held it in both hands, and in the quiet of her new home, with nothing yet placed, and everything still possible, she whispered, "This time, I will learn to rest." Nathan did not reply. He only placed his hand gently over hers, and they stayed there, in that quiet, in that beginning, together. Sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who never ask for help. They hold everything together. They show up, they stay quiet, and over time, they begin to disappear behind their responsibilities. This story reminds us of something simple, but important. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to matter, even when no one is asking anything from you. Grace teaches us that choosing yourself is not a selfish act. It is an act of survival. Love does not always arrive with flowers or promises. Sometimes, it comes through presence, through quiet hands, through warm food at the end of a long day. So, if you feel tired, if you have spent a lifetime giving to others, let this story remind you of this. You deserve to be cared for too. It is never too late to begin again. Not with grand changes, but with small, honest choices. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it touched your heart or reminded you of someone you love, please like the video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that speak quietly, but deeply. Your support helps keep these moments alive. From our hearts to yours, thank you.